power utility Eskom will receive a package from government to plug a 225 billion rand funding gap. Eskom spokesperson Andrew Etzinger is with us in studio. The bravest man I've called you in South Africa, Andrew. Every time you're here, you're under the cosh. And at the moment, the taxpayers are saying, why must we pay more money to Eskom? We've already had all these increases in tariffs, and now government is going to be taking NERSA out of the equation. That's the layman's version of what's happening here. What's the expert version?
Sure. Well, of course, the funding requirements of Eskom have been analysed in depth, I think, on your program and in other programs through the media. And it's quite clear that that Eskom needs an injection of cash in order to be sustainable. We have a massive new build program on the go. We've been running our open cycle gas turbines, burning a lot of diesel to keep the lights on. And
How
all
much
of these
is that
costs,
costing? I mean,
well, in our previous financial year, we spent 10 billion rand on diesel against a budget of around 2.5 billion rand, just to put that into.
All right, so 7.5 billion rand to keep the lights on. But per kilowatt hour, what does it cost to do gas turbines and diesel as against your coal fire?
Sure, around 3.50 rand for a kilowatt hour of gas turbine.
But you charge me, or Joburg charges me 98 cents or something.
That's the problem. So it's not sustainable. As compared to a coal-fired power station, which would be around 50, 60 cents. So it's a very big draw on
Let's stop there for a while. So you've been producing electricity at a premium to what you've been selling it at, but a substantial premium. So
yes.
At the margin, you're making big losses.
Absolutely.
Why?
System security, power system security, and bearing in mind also that at other times of the day we would make a profit. So that to an extent we do balance them off. But I think the important point is that we are running gas turbines harder than anybody anticipated, including our regulator. And that's why we've gone back to NERSA and we put forward a case to say this has been prudently incurred. It's important for the country to keep the lights on to the extent that we can. It's important for national psyche, for investor confidence, for all sorts of business continuity reasons, societal reasons.
But you've stopped that now. You're not, this keep the lights on at all costs strategy has been abandoned last time we spoke.
Exactly. What we've said now is that we're not going to defer maintenance any further in order to keep the lights on. So we will continue with the maintenance program, even if on a particular day it would mean that the lights would go off. Unfortunately, we've got to see the maintenance program through. Over the last couple of years, we've deferred maintenance. It has a benefit, of course, in keeping the lights on, but in the long run catches up with you when your maintenance...
And it's caught up with you now?
It has. It's resulted in plant performance of our generation fleet being unacceptably poor, and we need to reverse the downward cycle that we're in.
Andrew, why has Eskom not opened up and said to the private sector, because surely you can generate renewables, you can generate biomass electricity at a lot cheaper than 3.50 rand.
Certainly we can, and
but I mean we can, private sector can.
Yes, yes.
But why is it not opened up to the private sector?
I think what we must also look at is the balance and mix of plants in a utility such as Eskom needs to be made up of what we can call baseload power stations. These are power stations that you run on a 24/7 basis, and just for those couple of hours of peak, it's advantageous to invest in power stations with a low capital upfront cost but a high operating cost. So that balance is okay. When it looks, renewables certainly have their place, but bearing in mind also that the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. So for example, if you have an evening peak as we do from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m, just as the sun goes down, we hit our peak. That's exactly when the solar photovoltaic renewable power stations stop producing.
Use other things.
All of these things.
Clear the base load. I think everybody gets that.
Yes.
That we need these big coal-fired power stations because that's the base.
Right.
And for the peaks you need a little bit extra.
Yeah.
Why can't the private sector come in with its different schemes? Not necessarily wind or solar, but biomass is a possibility.
Yes.
Maybe somebody's got cheap diesel somewhere that they can put into the system.
Yeah.
Why is Eskom being reluctant to play that card?
All of the options that you've indicated are possible through the government's independent power producing program, IPP program that's out there. We've just closed the 4th round of bidders and has worked extremely well. It's probably the most aggressive, certainly on the renewables, including biomass program in the world at the moment.
So that's coming in?
Yes, those are at the moment about 1,000 megawatts is on the grid from those programs, and that is substantial. That is more than the first unit at Medupi.
We also know that Botswana has got a new power plant unfortunately, and this comes from the head of their Eskom,
Yes.
he was telling me that they made a big mistake by giving the Chinese the contract. They had to start again with the Germans, but now they're ready.
Yes.
Can you not buy some of their power?
It's a small power station. It's not going to make a big difference. It makes a big difference to Botswana. What's great about that particular power station is it does indirectly benefit South Africa as well. We've been exporting power to Botswana to support them. To the extent that 200 megawatt power station is now running, means that we've got 200 megawatts more generally available back in South Africa.
Getting back to the government support for Eskom,
Yeah.
within Eskom itself, what kind of plans have you got to make sure that this is a one-off, that we're not indefinitely going to be funding, the taxpayer is going to be funding the utility?
The first point is we have to be ruthlessly efficient as a business, and within the National Treasury Statement, I think, is an acknowledgement of our own business productivity program, which has really cut expenses to the bone and optimized our business to a point where we are as efficient as we possibly can be. Of course, there's always room for improvement, but certainly the changes to our operations, the cutting out of expenses wherever possible, means that as a start we're on a good base at the moment. We're
as
in a good
efficient
place.
as any global utilities? Do you compare with them?
We've been compared with international utilities at the time of putting forward our MYPD3 application. So NOSA has done that benchmark and concluded that we are efficient on an international basis. But over and above that, we have cut further and deeper into our operational cost, even to the point actually of at certain points almost compromising a bit of long-term sustainability. For example, cutting back on the pre-feasibility and the feasibility studies needed for new power stations for the country. We just don't have the cash to do those. Whether that's a clever thing to do or not, I think time will tell. Cutting back on the size of our coal stockpiles, again, it does introduce certain vulnerabilities and certain risks, but we just don't have the ability now to tie billions of rands on coal stockpiles at our power stations. So these are things, bursary schemes that we would have given
You've done
out
the
in the
best
past.
you can.
Oh yes, we've cut back on every possible cent.
Isn't there a concern, though, that there could be some stranded assets? You said you were at Medupi over the weekend.
Yes.
We know what's happening on the gas side. We know how the energy equation is changing all the time.
Yes.
You're building these huge, expensive coal-fired power stations. There's a suggestion that there will even be a nuclear station. How much attention's being focused on stranded assets or potential for stranded assets?
What we need to remember is that in terms of the new environmental legislation in particular, a lot of Eskom's existing coal-fired fleet is basically going to be redundant. It cannot economically be brought in line with modern emission standards, and a lot of that fleet would need to be retired. So simply put, it would cost 200 billion rand to invest in our existing fleet to make it compliant with the environmental legislation which is now coming out. So
we as a country have said we're going to be one of the greenest in the world. It's going to cost us 200 billion.
Yes, exactly.
We're not a rich country.
We're not a rich country.
Why would we do that?
Well, it's a bit of a disconnect then between the policy which has come through and the cost of compliance. From Eskom's point of view, we can't be acting in violation of the law, of course, and that's where we put forward an argument to ask for postponement, etc. But it's not to say that we'll get relief from the Department of Environmental Affairs. So stranded assets is the last of the things that we worry about at the moment. Yeah.
That's an interesting point Andrew Etzinger makes there, that we want to be the best in the world. We want to wave our flags about being green, but it's going to cost us 200 billion rand. Interesting. I wonder if those who were waving those flags that aggressively thought it through. Unintended consequences, perhaps. That was Andrew Etzinger, Eskom's spokesperson.